And Chris Cormier writes back and he goes, listen, if you take no advice at any point from me or anyone else in your life, please take the following. Stay the fuck as far away from that guy as you can.
All right. Hey, Mike. How's it going?
Good.
It's good. So, again, I've been doing this thing for like the past few months, and I want to give people a different perspective of certain things of like who you are as a person. Tell me a little bit about what got you into weight training.
Good question. What got us all into weight training? You know, us misguided birds of the wrong flock. Anyway, poetry was never my star pursuit. I got into lifting weights because I did one season of wrestling in high school, and I just noticed, physically noticed that being weak sucks. And like technique goes a really long way in wrestling, but especially 1 year in or one season in, you don't know a whole lot of technique. And also, even if you have really good technique, it's just so clear and obvious when you're fighting another human being. Like, wow, they're being stronger just be so awesome. Yeah. And so I started lifting weights to get better at wrestling, and I ended up falling in love with lifting weights sort of just for its own pursuit.
That's pretty interesting. When you do mention technique, I realize like you're well known for being able to perform things so like with good execution and all that. Do you think that stems from when you were like little, when you started wrestling? Do you think that's kind of like something that kind of pushed you further towards that?
That's a good question. So like basically like technique in wrestling is like knowing how to do the moves right. And there like attention to detail really helps, because it's not that you like in bodybuilding, if you just do shit right and the technique sucks, like, you know, there's not a huge immediate downside. You still feel successful. Like the weight doesn't declare itself the winner if you don't do a full range of motion. You can just still feel like you're winning, and you get some effect, right? In wrestling, if you have a sufficiently good opponent, it's instantly obvious that anything other than really good technique just gets you shut down, and you just can't do anything to them. And you're like, man, okay, techniques are really important. So I think people who transition from like wrestling and stuff like that to lifting, they're really keen on, and it's funny because I've helped a lot of jiu-jitsu people since I've started doing jiu-jitsu about 6 years ago. I was already bodybuilding. I've helped a lot of jiu-jitsu folks get into weight training or enhance their weight training. And jiu-jitsu folks are usually very open to like when they ask you how to lift weights, they usually like, so what's the right technique on this? Because they already know how important technique is. Yeah. And, you know, from regular bros, they don't ask you like technique, like whatever. They might be like, yeah, how do you do this? Like squat, you go up and down, like sweet. So they just go up and down like halfway, and that's good enough. So I will say that, you know, that does happen. In my case, man, I got to be honest, Paul, I started lifting with no regard for technique whatsoever because I was 14 years old, and I was just doing, like, man, all the usual high school bullshit. You know what I'm talking about? Like curls with a swing, benches not touching the chest, squats. Oh, my God. I didn't even train legs until my senior year of high school. I started my freshman year of high school because my science teacher made fun of me, and he like forced me to do legs one day. And then I just fucking started doing them. But like when I did start doing legs, if he wasn't around, I would cut my squats like super high, do like quarter squats and 8 squats. And just like, I did not have respect for technique. I can get into how I got a respect for technique if you want. I didn't hear that.
No, maybe later. Actually, just go a little bit into it, and let me kind of just understand from your perspective.
Sure. So like, I just basically had shitty technique, and for years, like freshman years, all through high school, my technique was like whatever, right? Like sometimes it was good by accident, but like usually it was just like that. Poor range of motion, like no standardization, lift like rep to rep. You know, like one squat was deep, the other squat was not, shit like that. And then I remember two things for sure got me to doing better technique, maybe 3. The first 2 big ones was, one is I saw this guy squatting what was not a very impressive weight.
Yeah.
And he was at my college gym, but he was doing like the deepest Olympic weightlifting squat I had ever seen a person do. And he was jacked, like way more jacked than me. but he just wasn't using that much weight relative to what I was using. But he I noticed his triceps on a squat. That's how jacked he was. You know, like you gotta be real jacked for someone to notice a muscle that you're not even using. And I was like, what? Like, I'm such a clown. I look like such a clown lifting all these big weights, even though I'm not even jacked. And this guy's jacked as fuck, and he's not even doing that much weight. But it looked like he was doing it so properly. And I was like, it was almost like a hit to my ego. I was like, am I cutting my squat depth here? Like, am I just like bitching out? And then like everyone who cuts their squats in the back of their heads knows they're bitching out. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it would be harder to squat lower. But you're like, I don't know. So I saw him, and I like gave that a lot of thought. I was like, holy shit! Like, I'm like a joke. And then also my sophomore year of college, I did my first powerlifting meet. So I got involved in competitive powerlifting. The thing is, in powerlifting, there is no choice about technique. Like if the deadlift doesn't start on the ground and end with lockout, you just don't count it. You have to touch the bench to your chest, and you have to do a full lockout, otherwise it doesn't count. And the squat has to be below parallel. So as soon as you start training in powerlifting, even your bodybuilding technique is gonna be cleaned up, because you just understand from an intuitive perspective, like lifts have rules, and if you partial lift, you just suck. And like, imagine doing assistance work for powerlifting, like leg press and front squat, for example. Like automatically, if you're doing 8 reps, you're going to understand, like, okay, this isn't helping me squat because my quads are going to feel like shit at the bottom of the squat, but I'm not even training that in the leg press. Like, what the hell am I even doing, right? So all of a sudden, it really, like, people who start bodybuilding from powerlifting usually have better technique, because they know they can't fuck around because the meet's coming up and there's going to be judges and stuff. And then the last thing, so those 2 major things. The last thing was, after those 2 incidents, basically my junior year of college, by then I had pretty good technique on stuff.
Yeah.
Every time I got a worse and worse technique. Like, you know, as you chase the numbers, which we should all be doing to some extent in the gym, sometimes you let your technique slide a little more and a little more and a little more. And after a couple of months, like what you used to call a one-arm row is like some kind of like you're having seizure sort of looking thing. Is every time I got away from good technique, I noticed that I would like get dinged up a little more, like a little hurt here and there. I would also lose a mind-muscle connection, and I would experience like more joint like soreness and dis-ease. And the workouts got harder, like physically the RPE went up, like they perceptively harder. Like if you use like 200-pound dumbbells for rows, it's going to feel like shit, right? Yeah, but definitely. I also noticed that the muscle itself wasn't being disrupted that much. Like the pumps weren't better. I remember I had one specific instance where I was doing quarter squats to pins with like, what was it? Like it was over 600 pounds. It was like in the mid 645 or something like that. And I was so proud of myself because the entire gym like froze, you know, like college gyms, right? It's like 18-year-olds, like they freeze over anything. So everyone thought I was a big dog. I did it for like 9 reps, like 655 for 9 reps quarter squat. I weighed like 180 at the time. And I remember being like, man, my quads are going to get trashed, right? And then like the next day, my knees were sore, like physically the knees. And like I had never experienced that in my life. And my quads were not at all sore. And I was like, man. So then every time over the years that I've sort of drifted towards worse technique, when I would notice these things, I would like, do you ever do like a hard recycle on technique where you're just like, I'm going to do my incline.
Start really light.
Yeah, exactly. Like what I used to call a pull down doesn't count. None of these PRs count anymore, just refresh. And I would do those periodically. And every time I did them, I would get an amazing mind muscle connection. Tons of my like actual muscular soreness, very little fatigue. And the only thing I realized was going on was like, man, I'm doing everything better. The only downside is that my ego hurts because I'm not lifting as much weight. And I realized like I'm trying to get jacked and strong. That means strong through 4-range motion. If you're trying to get strong, you've got to be 4-range motion anyway. And if you're trying to get jacked, the weight on the bar doesn't matter only insofar as, you know, it's actually stimulating. So because it was stimulating more and, you know, it was less weight on the bar, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to, that's it. I'm going to use good technique. And then so I've just been better at renorming. And I've had to renorm less and less because my technique has been so solid for a while. But even still to this day, because some folks listening might be like, oh man, like we got to, like Mike, you know, like probably doesn't recycle anymore, like his weights and stuff because his technique's always perfect. Bullshit. I recycle technique all the time and just be like, okay, forget about these numbers. Let's go back to basics. And I know how to push myself. I know what RAR is like. So I don't have like, because, you know, a lot of times recycling, you think you're cheating yourself. Like, man, I used to do 190 on pull downs. Now I'm doing 170. Like maybe I'm just not trying. But if you know what trying feels like, it's okay to do 170 instead of 190. just sharpen up your technique. As long as you're not overthinking it, you're good to go. So nowadays, I still recycle every now and again. It's less because my technique's better, but there's always time. At really the beginning of any mesocycle, when you move a little bit away from failure and you pick some new exercises, it's a really good time to do a mini recycle where maybe you don't go to the lowest weight you've ever done, but like you could start the pull downs with 180 and like, okay, maybe that'd be good. But you start with 170 anyway, and you get really, really crisp reps, and then you just build on that through the meso. So that would be like my technique journey. So
I mean, I actually do apply the exact same thing every so often, just to kind of like lower the weight and then just start all the way from the bottom and then work your way all the way up. So I think I've learned that like a while ago, and I've just been implementing, which is why most of my weights have never been like freaking 500-600 pounds of like squats.
But who gives a shit, right? Look at your physique.
Exactly. There's like really no need to. Now that we kind of understand that was like a main focus point that kind of like taught you more of like techniques and how to like perform things properly, especially from jiu-jitsu perspective and wrestling. You do have a bit of a fighting background. When you started with your whole wrestling, were you overweight, underweight, skinny, or what were you when you started?
Yo, man, that's a great question. I was both. I was like skinny fat, right? Like I was like 5'2" and 120 pounds, which is chubby. And I was not muscular, and I had a little gut and everything, and love handles. And so I just I was exactly the guy that you would want to wrestle because like I sucked. And through the wrestling season, I started wrestling when I was 14, and that first wrestling season was like 3 months long. And through that season, I went from 120 down to 100 pounds. So I actually wrestled at the 103 pound weight class towards the end of my freshman year of high school. And because I lost all that weight, I was leaner and I could actually see muscles for the first time. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. So then during the rest of that year, I basically maintained at around 100 pounds and just got progressively leaner as I lifted weights. And then only during the summer did I actually get bigger for the first time. So during that summer, I went from 100 to 120. The next summer after that, I went 120 to 140. And then I went for the last summer before high school, 140 to 160. And then after high school, that first summer before college, I went 160 to 180. So like I would just eat during the summers and lift like crazy and then sort of like maintain and sharpen up over the years. I don't recommend that. This is what I did. But I started out like both skinny and fat. So like when people say like, people ask, I'm sure you get this question all the time. Like I'm starting lifting and I'm too skinny to cut, but I'm too fat to mass. What do I do? It's like, yo, like I've been there. I know what that feels like.
Yeah, I've actually never had that question asked to me because I've always been like the skinny kid. All I had to do was just eat, and I've never really had to worry about it. But
did the eating come naturally to you, Paul, or was it like eating was like tough? Because some people just don't like to eat.
I like to eat. I like food. I literally like. It's one of the reasons why like when I compete, I tend to like screw myself up because I like food. And like it would get towards like the end of like prep, and I'll just be like, oh, I'm really craving a bunch of donuts right now, and it just like screws me up, which I don't like it. But I'm trying to work on it really hard. But it's just like something I've had since I was like a little kid. It's like that pattern of just like always getting away with eating whatever you want. And never putting on like a lot of weight or getting fat that you're just like, I can do this all the time. Like, to admit this, the last few weeks of my last prep, I was eating like 5,000 calories and I'd wake up leaner.
Fuck you.
But it also screwed me up because I was just like, I can get away with this. And I kept on doing it and doing it and doing it. And eventually it caught up to me because I was.
You'd get even leaner if you weren't doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes that can be a little bit of an issue.
What were they calorie-wise, Paul, if you don't mind me asking? I'm dieting super hard right now, so I'm just living vicariously through your stories. Like, what were you eating? Was it all clean food, or was it like you were putting in some work there?
Donuts, croissants, lots of hoagies, lots of like fruit punch and like juices. I worked. Oh my God. So I was like stuck between like, okay, I finished my macros. All right. Because my calories were like so low. So I was like, well, time to finish my macros. I'm just like, all right, so I'm stuck at work. A lot of food around me.
Yeah.
What can I get?
Oh my God.
So I ate a lot afterwards. The whole idea of you bouncing back and forth with your weight over the summer, how did you felt like, did that increase your confidence when you weighed less during your younger years? as you were doing a whole, like, I gained 10 pounds during the summer, and then like I cut back again and I gained another pounds of fall in summer, that like affect your way of thinking psychologically?
Yeah, man, I gotta tell you, like, maybe most teenagers are like this, but my head was such a fucking mess when I was a teenager, dude. Like, I would just be speculating if I thought that affected me. I'll tell you, like, from memory, when I got a little pudgier over the summers, it surprisingly didn't affect me negatively a ton because I had gotten so much bigger and stronger that I was like, this is awesome. And then when I would like maintain, I lose a little bit of weight, but usually just maintain through the rest of the year, but get leaner while building muscle. When I did that, I certainly liked the look of being leaner. But I got to tell you this, man, I don't know how this happened, but there's definitely like, I don't know if you ever heard of like the happiness treadmill hypothesis. Is like whatever kind of life you have, you sort of tend to get used to it, and then things that make you happier when they first enter make you a lot happier, but then like you get used to them, so you just sort of recede back to a pretty same level of like, for example, like if we take a kid from Africa, hey, a fucking perfect example. So if we take a kid from right, if we take a kid from Africa and like put him in just like, you know, like a regular middle class American house, he's gonna be like, oh my God, these people have infinity food and there's nobody fucking trying to kill me and there's no disease. It's amazing. But like the Americans that are used to that, they're like, oh man, like my life sucks. I just live in this house with all this food. It's so boring. And if you take that guy and put him on like planes with hookers, like Dan Bilzerian style, that guy's going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I'm pretty sure most of the people that are like on planes with hookers, they like die of heroin overdoses after a few years because there's just nothing left to make them. Yeah. So in the same way, I for sure for a period of multiple years would discover that was happening with my weight gain and my muscle gain. Like I remember getting to 160 pounds for the first time. 160, man. And like that was probably with like 15% body fat, maybe 15 to 20. And I like coined the term super mass for myself. I was like, I feel so big because I like for the first time ever had like roundness to my muscles. Like you remember like when your chest first started to get round, I was like, what the fuck? Like when I was like pumped in the gym after a pec pump, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like stuff's really starting to fill in. And I was like, I'm huge. And then like now when I'm like, you know, dieting and I'm a flat 230, I'm like, man, I look small as fuck. But that's insane. You know, like I thought I was big when I was 160, but like after I got to 160, I felt big for a while. And then I still felt pretty big. But so I never had like muscle dysmorphia as far as like I thought it was small. Yeah. But like I would get to 160 and stay there for like a year. I thought I was like, I'm pretty jacked. But then I would look at 180 and be like, man, that's
jacked
really
is 160.
Yeah. Like that's really where people are living the good life. So then I would get to 180 and I was like, man, I'm huge. And then a couple months later, a year later, I was like, man, at 200, that's where the really big guys are. And then I wouldn't say made this mistake. I would say this is joking when I say made this mistake. This wasn't a mistake at all, but like I started reading Flex magazine when I weighed like 200 to 220. And I was like, I don't even lift weights. You know, these people are superheroes. So then that like sort of the bug bit me then for like actual bodybuilding, like really trying to get as jacked as possible. And then eventually that got me, I was a drug-free 270, very fat, like probably 25% fat. But like, fuck, man, at 5'6", 270, even 25% fat, drug-free, it's a fucking lot, man. It was super strong. And then, you know, you know, in an alternate universe, when I was not drug-free, I, you know, eventually, you know, carried just last year, actually, or a year and a half ago, I had like a semblance of abs at like 260. And that was like, then I was starting to get really fully convinced that I'm really jacked because I started having trouble like touching various parts of my body, you know, like showering, like after a pec pump was like, I couldn't wash my own armpits. I was like, oh, I just got to wait an hour until my pec pump is preventing me from reaching across my body and touching myself. So at that point, like nowadays, I'm pretty convinced I'm objectively super fucking jacked. But I got to tell you, like, my training partners don't help. Like, I think I'm jacked, and then I train with you, and I see, like, the roundness in your shoulders, and I'm like, fuck this. Like, I'm not even fucking big. And then, like, you know, you've trained with Charlie before, and you look at his quads, and you're like, none of us lift weights.
Yeah, I'm like, I can't get, like, quads as big as Charlie. And it's just
we're all fucked up is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, like, I think when we start from, like, an earlier age, we do tend to create this you may not say it's a body dysmorphia, but I think it really is. We always want to be better and bigger than what we are. And then we got ourselves stuck in this repetitive cycle of like you started at 160 and you're like, okay, I look pretty big, but it's so short lived that you're just like, I'm chasing the next big thing. And it just keeps on going and going. It's like a repetitive cycle to a point where personally for me, I'm kind of still trying to figure it out, but I'm never fully satisfied with like the way I look. I know I'm not fucking like small. I'm not like 160 or whatever, but it's just like, I don't know. It's just, I just don't quite look as big as I want to be.
I think that's from two things, man, to be honest. Two distinct things. Thing one is I think we all get used to looking at ourselves. Like
Yes.
when you're coming off of comp prep and you're pushing things harder and you're pushing the food like early in a mass gaining phase, so you're still lean and super loaded with glycogen.
Yeah.
There's probably, like, it certainly happens for me, I'm sure it happens for you, days when you get like a chest and shoulder pump and you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, dude, I am a fucking freak. Like, what the fuck? Like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, there's times,
myself, why do I even lift?
right. It's like, right. Exactly. Like there's been times during various diet phases where I'll pull my shirt off at the gym and Charlie and I will just start laughing because I look like a human tank. I can barely take my shirt off. My pecs are just like up here and shit. I'm like, amazing. Yeah. But like, that's the thing is like, just the thing one is you get used to looking at that shit. And then you're like, yeah, okay, I'm big, right? And after a while, you're like, this is just me. And so that's factor one. That doesn't help. And factor two is until you're big Rainy, there's always a bigger fish, right? And then you look at magazines or you go to competitions or just fuck magazines. I feel like I'm in the 90s. Instagram, man, I could have a fucking ball or pump and then I scroll up and down my feed and there's three, Rolly Winkler is like the ghost in all of us where you're like, oh, I'm big. And then Rolly Winkler posts an Instagram pic from fucking, what's his name? That gym in Kuwait, Oxygen, and that magic mirror. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. And then all of a sudden you're like, man, I scroll back to my own picture, scroll to his, scroll back to my own, scroll to his. And I'm like, fuck, I suck. And then you're like, all right, let's push this thing even further and try to get even bigger. And yeah, I don't know when that ends. I was thinking okay, when does that end? I can think of two people for whom maybe it ends, but then it really doesn't. Person number one is Big Rainy because he's just objectively height for weight, whatever you want to talk about, stage presence, the biggest. So maybe he doesn't want to get bigger in his heart of hearts, but he probably wants to get leaner. So maybe that haunts him. But as far as relative size, do you know who, what was his name? Nicholas Vuliad? I think mispronouncing his name a ton. He's a 212 competitor. I'll send you his Instagram later or something.
Yeah, I could definitely look it up.
He's 5'2" or 5'3" and in the 200-pound range. But dude, Paul, I look at pictures of him, I have no idea how he washes his own body. His bicep, it's got to be his arm has to be out here when his bicep impedes his movement. There's no way he shaves his own face. He's just completely folded. I have no idea how he hits half the poses. That's how fucked up it is. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, there's no way he wants to get more jacked. But sure enough, he does. And I'm sure just because he only weighs 200-ish because he's so short, he probably looks at the guys like Rolly Winkler and he's like, well, I'm not absolutely as big as they are. I could still get bigger. I just don't think there's any way out of this for anyone. I don't know.
Yeah, it's you can't really win regardless, but you just have to learn to be comfortable with who you are and the things that you do. But it does get a little steep when you're competitive. It gets ridiculously steep because there's always guys out there that are going to be bigger and better than you. Yeah, it's kind of the hard part. Yeah. Starting out as wrestling and then going towards weight training, did that motivate you in any way to pursue what you're currently pursuing in life right now? Did it motivate you to kind of, let's say, be a better person in terms of life?
Well, it was structured my entire career eventually around lifting weights. So it definitely took me in that direction. I don't know. I can't say in retrospect how much it had an influence on my thought processes about how things work, because we can never quite tell what's the causality. Are the people who are driven to work hard in the gym and be patient for results just genetically or through upbringing or through other factors already the people that would find those things valuable and practice them in other fields? Or is it the gym teaching you some of that and then later you take it to other fields? Because it's not clear to me which one of those it is. But I will say that if there is a lesson to be learned in the gym, and certainly from my experience, then it's one of those, like, the gym is such a great place for those lessons. I might have actually learned more through reading about people's experiences in the gym as I was training, and emulated them, than I did from my own. So I don't like to learn for myself much. Like, nobody looks up to themselves. I mean, unless you're like nuts or something. Like, I don't look up to myself. So I'm not like, oh man, I really did great working hard. I should keep doing it. Like, I don't know, like whatever. But like, I remember like reading a bunch of like Flex magazine and Muscular Development magazine and following bodybuilders. And I was training at that time super hard. And I really, like, everything they said, I was like, But I remember people saying like, you know, it's really all about consistency, and you got to love what you're doing, but you got to show up day in and day out. And it's all about who can get into that structure, eat the meals, do the workouts, eat the meals, do the workouts. And if you just do that long enough, you're just going to get as good as you possibly can. And if you don't do that and deviate from it, you're just never going to amount to shit. And I remember like, there was do you know who Chris Cormier is?
I've heard of him. He was one of the early bodybuilders in the 90s.
Yeah, correct. He was like a 90s star. He's now actually a very good coach. And he had a column on muscular development, and this kid wrote to him. This is a fucking hilarious story. This kid wrote to Chris, and he's like, Chris, I need your advice on something. I had really a lot of trouble gaining weight, and because I couldn't eat much. And I asked this guy at the gym who seemed to know what he was talking about. And he said that he can help me gain weight because pot can help. And if I smoke weed, I'll get hungrier. And the guy sold me weed, and he was kind enough to do that. And then I started smoking weed. I started eating a lot, but it was just munchies and snack foods. And I got like way fatter. And now this guy says, and I talked to the guy again, and I was like, oh, getting really fat. And now he can help me get fatter by selling me like stimulants like methamphetamine. Like, what do you think I should do? Should I take like the meth? And Chris Cormier writes back, and he goes, listen, if you take no advice at any point from me or anyone else in your life, please take the following. Stay the fuck as far away from that guy as you can. This is the worst advice anyone's ever given you. What you need to do is stop smoking weed, don't do meth, just push yourself to be consistent, eat a bit more food than you're comfortable with, and over time, be patient, you will gain muscle. And I was like, man, that is such great. It was just like, I just like reading it. I'll never forget that passage, because like, goddamn, like he could have changed that kid's life if that kid ever fucking read it. And sure changed mine, because I was like, man, like, you know, anytime people talk about like quick tricks or supplements, super fat burning, and this will make a big change, I always think back to that passage where that kid was being offered like just only shortcuts to nowhere. And I'm like, man, that's good advice. So like reading about the bodybuilder's account of their dedication made me want to emulate them. You know, and I'm like, I wanted to be like Ronnie Coleman, who was like just notorious for never missing a meal. Another quick story is, this isn't like one for good business practice, and you'll know what I mean when I say it, but
Gotcha.
Supposedly Dorian Yates was like at the Arnold or something, or at some show signing like autographs, and he was there with a supplement company that he was sponsored by, and he'd been there for like a certain number of total hours a day, and he was signing, and then like the promoter turns around and Dorian Yates is gone, and he's like, what the fuck, there's people like wanted to come up to you and you sign their shit. So they finally tracked him down. He was eating a meal, and he's like, dude, what are you doing? You're supposed to be signing. He's like, I have to eat. And the guy's like, well, you're supposed to be signing. Dorian's like, I don't think you understand. I do not miss meals. I will not miss a meal this entire offseason leading up to the Mr. Olympia. It won't happen. So I'm going to eat my meal, and I'm going to get back to signing. And the guy's like, okay. And that was it. I was like, God damn. Like, yeah, kind of a dick move to not tell people in advance you're going to be going to eat. You know what I mean? Like, you are contractually obligated to do that shit. But I was like, holy fuck. Like, if that story's true, even if it isn't, like, that's a baller level of dedication, you know? So I think, I don't know if I learned from my own experience in the gym to be super dedicated, but I'll tell you this, man. By reading the shit the bodybuilders were saying about being super dedicated, having a plan, not being an idiot, staying consistent, resisting temptation, by implementing that, I saw my own success, right, really, really grow. And then to me, if someone's like, I don't know how much consistency matters, like, to me, it's not an open and shut case. It's almost like if you're like, super skeptical of some kind of medicine working, but then not only do the best doctors say it works, but you got sick with some disease, and then they gave you the medicine and you got 50 times better in like an hour and a half, you're going to be walking around pretty like, you know, someone was like, hey, I heard that medicine sucks. You're like, no, it doesn't. Fucking idiot.
It works.
You know, like, so for me, both my experiences, but more like reading about other people's shit, trying that, and being super consistent definitely helped me. And maybe to some extent that spilled over into other areas of life where, like, you know, like whatever, I will say, like, the systematic approach just works better. So like if you want to be good at anything, you got to examine it systematically. And I guess that does make sense, because like when I started jiu-jitsu, by the time I started jiu-jitsu, I was already a bodybuilder. Shitty one, but I was already like super jacked and very lean, and I had been bodybuilding for a while. I already had a PhD in sports science. So by the time I started jiu-jitsu, when my coaches said like, okay, like, you have to understand the system, not just a bunch of different moves, to me that made like the most perfect sense anyone's. I mean, I was like, duh, right? And maybe if I hadn't lifted weights for a bunch of time and actually applied a system and seen its results, and also had shitty results when I didn't apply a system, maybe I would be like, I don't know, systems, schmistems, I just want to learn how to kill people. Right? Like, I think maybe you're right. Maybe I was like just through lifting for a long time, trying to understand that like things require patience and things build slowly, and the more systematic you are, the better.
And I think that's actually the one thing a lot of people do take out of lifting weights. I mean, people who are genuinely like at a competitive level, that is exactly how they become successful, because that repetition, doing things over consistently, whether it means like tracking your workouts, tracking your food, doing everything you need to do, is kind of what builds up, and eventually it kind of goes over to other parts of your life. Like that might also, you focus on your workouts and like the things that you did would have actually helped in a way in terms of like schooling and going to college, because you know, okay, I have to work really hard to get to where I need to be, whether that,
and it doesn't feel good right away.
Yeah,
just like in lifting.
Yeah, but the more you do it over and over again, the more it's just like, okay, it just becomes a habit. It's like you're kind of taking away like an old habit and then like putting a new one in.
Yep.
And for me, that's personally what I learned is like, I think it's weird, but like I can't get anything done if I don't have a system towards working out. If my workouts are shit and I don't have like something in there to kind of like plan it all out and just go train and stuff like that, my entire day is ruined. And it's ruined for the fact it's just like I just deviate from the plan.
Yeah.
And that can be very, very annoying.
I will tell you, man, I even have trouble like, so I travel. We used to before the coronavirus thing anyway. And I'm sure I'll travel. Right. Back in my day, we had airplanes that went to other countries. It's like nonsense.
Give it 3 years.
All right. So, you know, when I travel a lot of times I'll have to like substitute exercises and sub out machines, or just like make up a program kind of on the spot. Paul, like, I hate it. I'm like Mr. Program. I'm supposed to be able to make some shit up because I have all this fucking knowledge. I fucking hate doing it. I would just like to train at the same fucking gym with the same weight so I could put 2.5 more pounds on the bar and get 1 extra rep from last week. And I know exactly how sore I'm going to get and all this other stuff. Like, so that consistency and that routine is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And like, it's fun to travel and like get to other gyms, cool lighting, new machines. But it's bittersweet because like even with all the fucking shit that I know or whatever, I still just like you, like I want a plan. I want a system, because once you know the system works, it's so awesome to just, it's like cooking, like it's like putting a soup on simmer or something. It's just fucking cooking in the background. You got to worry about it, and you know the shit is fucking happening. I will say though, now that we're on this topic, it's really crazy, and I'm sure you've been around enough folks like this by this time in your career. It's almost seeming like to a lot of people like we're preaching to the choir, right? Like blah blah consistency, like no shit. Dude, I don't know if you have any stories, man, but I have had some folks that I've trained with or have trained or just watched and I was friendly with them, just cannot stick to a fucking plan. Any kind of plan. They can't even get, like, I like, remember this like hit me hard when I was like on Instagram following some pros, not the very good ones actually. And there's a reason why they're not the very good pros. They like pride themselves over and over. Like, it's not just something they say once, because it sounds cool to say once, over and over about like, no meals will be missed or workouts missed this off season. And I'm thinking,
straight douchebags.
Dude, like, motherfucker, I don't understand. Do you not like to eat your food? Why would you ever miss a meal? Second of all, missing workouts in the off season, bro, workouts in the off season are amazing. I thought we all like to work out. I want to pat myself on the back for like, okay, I will not overtrain this fat loss cycle. Like, I will not do too much. But like, these guys are patting themselves on the back for not missing workouts. And I realized why. Because a bunch of these motherfuckers will disappear for days or weeks. Some of them don't even like to train that much. And all of a sudden you realize like the people talking about consistency, they're talking to a real group of people who are genetically pretty gifted have the tools, but just like, man, they disappear. Sometimes they just cheat. And sometimes, like, it's not even like, you'll get guys who are like, you know, like, if you eat more calories, you're still losing fat. Fine, fuck it. But like, you got guys just going off the rails and be like, yeah.
I don't want to cut you off, but I feel personally attacked.
Yeah, there you go. You should, goddammit. Yeah, like, you know, but hey, at least you kept getting leaner, right? I mean, there's guys that like, they know that if they cheat, they're not going to get leaner. They know it's not going to be great for their results, and they just fucking do it anyway. Was fundamentally, they just really don't give a shit, you know? Like, just they don't give enough of a shit. And forget it. Like, okay, if you're cheating on your diet or whatever, like, you eat this way, eat that way, you ain't never missing any workouts. There's guys that like would be too lazy to work out. Like, can you imagine coaching someone? Because you coach a lot of people. Can you imagine coaching someone that we are like, hey, how was your Tuesday like back workout? Can you imagine them being like on a Wednesday, they'd be like, oh yeah, like I didn't get it in, you know? You know, have you had that happen before?
Quite multiple times.
How do you deal with that as a coach? Like, I don't even know where to begin. That's why I don't coach anymore. I just deal with computers.
I don't like when they do it, because like specifically you do get ones where you create a plan for them to follow. And
you took time to do that shit too.
Exactly. And they pay you money for you to like create this routine for them to follow, but like they kind of like skip around here and there. So, I mean, I don't know what's the word. I'm negotiable. So if someone like skips, I'm like, all right, listen, man, it's not the end of the world. I get it. And I know that you missed out a workout, but just get back on track. Like, get back on track. No need to like eat less calories or eat more calories to make up for whatever you.
Oh, because they want to make up for that shit, huh?
Yeah. So they're, oh, I'm just going to work out twice again the following day, like twice a day. I'm just like, no, dude, just get back to where you screwed up. Go to the next day, work out that, and just keep it consistent. You just keep it going. Like, I had someone who I was coaching, and it was like their graduation or whatever, and like they started skipping workouts. I kept on checking on them to make sure like they're following everything, and they don't send me their check-ins. So I was like, okay, you're not sending me your check-ins, and then like a month later they put on.
Are you alive?
Yeah, exactly. And they put like a lot of weight on, and now I'm just trying to get them back into it. But I'm very patient.
That's a big key to being a good coach, man, is patience, because a lot of people are going to some extent let you down. I just always like, not from a coach, I mean, clearly patience is the right thing from the coaching perspective, but sometimes I just ask myself, I don't know, man, there's so many other hobbies that don't require like consistency. Like if you play darts, it's fun. You don't have to be super consistent. You can have fun with your friends.
Yeah.
Like people get into this and they're like the bros that just like to pump iron and get like jacked, run a like D-ball cycle every now and again. Like, sweet, you're the man. Like, fucking have fun. And they miss a couple of days of training because they're at like Jersey Shore, like getting drunk. Like, dude, live life, man. Life's for living. But like when people are like, I want to be a competitive bodybuilder, okay, and they're like start fucking up all the time, you're just like, wait, are you sure you want to be a competitive bodybuilder?
Yeah,
this is strange. Like, why would you put? Yeah,
it's just one of those a lot of people don't really understand, which is kind of strange. Growing up, we actually have something in common with like anime and stuff like that, and I know that you're a big fan of DBZ. Did you think that like impacted you towards all this in a way?
Not in a way, in the way. Dude, yeah. So I watched my first episode of VBZ when I was 14 years old, when I had literally just begun to lift weights. And I remember thinking, like, this animation sucks. This is my first thought. It's like their mouths don't even match what's been said, and they mostly don't even move, and it's just a bunch of talking. And for some odd reason, I like gave it another shot. Like a friend of mine really loved it, and I was like, well, Dave can't be totally crazy. And then I watched a couple more episodes, and like they got to the fighting, and I was like, whoa. Because like, I don't know if most boys think like this, but I certainly imagine there to be like a scale of power where like you start with like just a normal human. What would be cooler, like if he knew martial arts? What would be even cooler, like if he was also really big and strong? What would be cooler than that? Like if he had like some mild superpowers, you know, like some kind of like something like Green Arrow, you know, like he doesn't have superpowers, but he do like crazy flips and the shit like normal people obviously can't. Batman doesn't have superpowers, but goddamn, he's, you know, sure looks like it sometimes. And then like mild, this is the nerdiest conversation you may ever have in the podcast.
It's good.
Mild magical abilities. Like Jean Grey in like the first X-Men movies. Like she can move a fucking cup off the wall or some shit. Like that's fucking sweet, right? And I'm always thinking like as a kid, for sure, and still as an adult, I'm certainly a child on the inside.
I think people are.
Yeah, famous Michael Jackson quote. I'm just kidding. That's fucked up.
Too soon.
It was too good to pass on.
Yeah.
We're all children on the inside. Michael Jackson. Like, oof, woof.
Well, he's not wrong.
Differently. He's not. I always envisioned, and I still do, like the scale of like, okay, but then what about like more? Especially in like, there's like this ultimate fantasy that like, for example, vampires. Vampires are perfect because vampires are like stronger than regular people, right? Faster than regular people, but they're not exactly Superman, right? What I saw in Dragon Ball Z was two things. One, you had the whole spectrum from humans all the way up to gods covered, and also people who started out human-like, Saiyans and stuff, even Krillin, for the love of God, we're talking about Krillin, how terrible this is. Right, like even Krillin, who's human, like got up to, they actually trained and got up to being God. So the idea that you could train in to someone who could like just go boom and just destroy a planet, I was just like, because like that's the difference between anime and specifically DBZ versus like American canon, like DC and Avenger or DC Universe and Marvel Universe, is that like Thanos, sure Thanos trained or whatever, but like
I don't think he does.
He practices by killing people.
Yeah. I mean, when you're
right, right, exactly.
It's pretty much
I don't think he trains.
Yeah.
So like, like Captain America got all this shit out of a fucking vial. You know what I'm saying? But like, I don't think he trains. Like he does train, but like he's already there. You know what I mean? Like, but in DBZ there's this, and that doesn't really speak to all of us who didn't start strong, who wanted to be bigger, who wanted to be greater. DBZ was like, hey, if you start at the bottom, like Goku, you can eventually like fight God and win. And it was like, fuck, like that instantly hit me. I remember like Piccolo, when he fused with Nail on Namek, and he's just like discovered that he had this whole new body. And I was like, like that's really like that feeling isn't alien at all to someone who is like in the peak of contest prep and like you have a sweatshirt on and you pull it off, you flex and there's just veins and so you're like, oh my God, like I'm not mortal anymore. Unbelievable. And to make those big changes and become better, like DBZ was just the thing. And I'll tell you what, one of the most impactful things on my psychology, or at least sure it feels like it, is the hyperbolic time chamber concept from Dragon Ball Z.
You mean what we're living in now?
More or less, which is why I don't fucking mind the quarantine at all. Like, well, you've seen those videos from when we had the rooftop gym bullshit set up, and like it was just like awful, but like there it is. So the thing is, and this is answering a couple of your questions at the same time. When I was like 14, 15 years old, and I saw all the episodes about the hyperbolic time chamber, I had this idea that when you go away from everyone else, when you simplify your existence to no distractions, when you challenge yourself over and over and over, close to the brink of your limits, something very special happens at the end of that. And that, for me, powered my journey of lifting, powered my journey of martial arts, powered my journey of school. It's like, when they say, like, hey, it's time to get a PhD, they mean you will sit in a fucking laboratory, only air conditioning, to keep you company for hours on end, doing boring number crunching and shit that is fucking difficult as hell for your mind to wrap around. You feel like you're going insane. You haven't seen a human being in days. All of that, and then the next day you do it again, and the next day do it again. Remember that shit in DBZ when Trunks goes on like to talk about how it was in the time chamber? He's like, I didn't even know like what was up and down anymore. Like I didn't know every day was the same, and it was just like I was on the brink of death. Like
no.
Dude, right? And it was like at one, I knew those, I had basically memorized all those episodes by the time I got to PhD program. And to me, I loved it. I was like, yes, like I'm in the time chamber finally. And all I did during the PhD program was train and learn and work. And I came out of there 3 years later as Dr. Mike. like legitimate, like actually Dr. Mike, and like now the person that knows a bunch of shit and is jacked, is when I went in my PhD programs were much less jacked and I knew way less shit. So that idea that you can recede away and fucking grind and you just won't become linearly better, something exponential will happen in there, is like basically as close of a thing as I have to religion. Like if you're like, what's your religion? I'd be like, hyperbolic time chamber is up there. It's top 2 or 3, like, you know what I'm talking about, man?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like, that's why I made the whole joke with the whole quarantine thing, because that's literally what it feels. I've been preaching a lot on my Facebook how like maybe it's not my place to talk to people like that, but I feel like now is the opportunity for people who are struggling in life to kind of like, again, go through that hyperbolic time chamber, focus on what they want to do, because there's like no distraction. There's literally no distraction. Everything is gone. You can focus on all that stuff while you're at home all the time, and you don't have to worry about like going to work, the government's giving you money, and everything's like where it needs to be. Like eventually when you do all that within this time period this is happening, that's why like earlier I was like, I expect people to come out to be stronger and better than they were before going into all of this.
Well, let me tell you this, man. Remember what I think it might have been Kami, or what was it, the genie guy or whatever?
Mr. Popo.
Somebody, one of them said that most people can't go into the time chamber because when you go in there, you have to lock the door for a certain amount of time. And he said most people go insane. Yeah. Like they actually can't survive it, and not just physically but mentally. And you know, like Vegeta like scoffed at the idea, and of course like blew right through it and ascended as Super Saiyan. But like, yeah, some people will come out of this just fucking stronger, and I think some people will come out of it as just a terrible experience. They fucking hate it because they don't, that baseline. There's like a thing that happens in tough situations. It's like a fork in the road, I think, where and you know these pathways intersect. I think every minute and every day you have a choice as to which one you want to be on. But the more you're on one or the other, the more they sort of steer apart. And the choice is this: do I accept my circumstances and do the best that I can to improve the situation and make use of it to get better at stuff, or do I rebel psychologically and wish I was somewhere else and turn to drinking or food or drugs or everything else, or just to like posting Facebook statuses about how I hate everything and I'm super bored? Like, you know what I'm saying? One of those gets you on the right path. One of those is largely wasteful and just causes psychological fatigue. So I think that like if you're, you know, sort of going into the time chamber, so to speak, like to use DBZ reference fully, like you know the gravity's higher, so nothing you could do about that. You know the air is harder to breathe. There's nothing you can do about that. There's nobody to talk to because it's just you or just you and one other person. And if you just try to survive, okay, you know you probably get stronger. But if you use it as a time to train, if you do what Vegeta did and Goku and Gohan did, you're going to make something special out of it. And imagine, because the quarantine's going to come to an end sooner or later. And it may be very soon for many people, or maybe a little bit later for others. But, you know, imagine you can look back on the situation one of two ways, or on a spectrum of one of two ways. You could say, man, this whole quarantine thing sucked and I hated it. And I like let my body go. I let my mind go. And I was just like, thank God we're back in the open world. I really needed this. Or you could look back on it. You know, everyone's going to have a mix of one of those two to some extent. But or you could look back at it and be like, man, like, that shit was fucked up, but boy, did I do some shit about it, man. And I fucking had like 5 audiobooks, and I trained my ass off. I built up a new client base for at-home training, and I learned how to communicate better, and all these other things. And then you come out into the world, and you're now that better person, but you get to go to all-you-can-eat sushi, but you get to go to clubs and see your friends, but you get to go hiking and camping. Then the world is a fucking beautiful place. You know, like, you don't want to come out of some, you know, hellhole. Like, you can come out of this basically feeling like you've been imprisoned, or feeling like you were in the hyperbolic time chamber and you've trained that much more to be a better person. I think largely we make that choice every day.
Yeah. I actually just put myself in that exact same situation. I actually quit my job.
No shit.
Yes. I worked at WoW for like a few years, and I went to like management position, but it just wasn't really fulfilling in a way. So I actually quit it because I was just like, okay, I've been here for so long. I want to try something different. And now I'm in a position where I have to like put myself in that hyperbolic time chamber, because now I have the opportunity to possibly make a lot more money. I sent some pictures to a modeling agency, and that went out great. And now they're trying to get me into acting. So like currently at this moment, I'm like on my screen every week trying to like act certain scenarios.
No shit.
Yeah, with like the guy who's like teaching me and stuff. And at first it was a little bit difficult because I was just like, of course, stressful. I'm just like, I didn't know how to handle this. I just quit my job, all this other stuff. But then I realized this is like the perfect opportunity, because I have no other distraction to like distract me from what I could potentially be afterwards. So I've been doing that. And also at the same time, like made a whole home gym at my apartment just so
it looks pretty sweet, man.
Yeah, I just need to get a little bit more stuff to patch it. I was actually thinking like at this time, just try to train people at my own place and then see how that goes. But I don't know.
Not a bad idea.
Based on how everything is going, but I think that'd be a lot better, because I know right now there's a lot of people out there who do not have access to a gym, and that it would be beneficial for them to just have someone that knows what they're doing and what they're saying, to be able to be like, hey man, just come to my place, you charge us, and so it's not going to be as much as going to an actual gym.
Totally, man. A lot of people don't even want to go to actual gyms. If they could just go to your house and use your weight set, then they'd just be that much happier, because like gyms are crowded. Some people don't want that, man.
Yeah, exactly. And I decided, okay, but it's so weird because like I put myself in a situation where I have to adapt, where most people are still kind of like struggling to decide, hey, do I want to like kind of go over the stress and be better, or do I just want to stay with the stress? Let's just like working out, for example. Like I explained the whole concept of like progressive overload to people simply as this. You have to stress the body, you adapt, and then you stress the body again and you adapt, and do that over and over and over again. Because like when you do that over and over again, eventually you're going to get stronger, you're going to get bigger, everything will change. But if you just like have stress and don't really do anything to progress, which is AKA use the same weight, use the same training method, improvement or whatever, you're going to just remain stagnant and just be the same as you are. So for anyone, in particular, if they want to be able to be a better version of themselves, they have to be able to constantly put stress on them over time, because the more stress you add on to yourself as a person, the better you'll be able to adapt to that. And then that stress that you had before would just be like, okay, whatever, it's not a big deal. And then you just go on to the next one.
Also, if you challenge yourself, the breaks mean that much more. Like, I never understand when people who don't do anything go on vacation and they get excited about it. I'm like, what the fuck are you getting excited about? You're on vacation every day. Like, you ain't doing shit. But, like, if you work, not only do you get way more money to afford cooler vacations, but when you're on vacation, you just, like, break. Like, my wife and I work our asses off. She's a fucking medical doctor. She works her ass off. When we go on vacation, man, we don't give a fuck about shit. And it feels so good because we're so busy giving a fuck all the other times.
Yeah. And that's what I realized. Occasionally, I know from like a scientific perspective or whatever people do, they don't really do this. But occasionally, every 2 to 3 months, I literally just don't lift.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
A week and just like eat and then just rest up. And it's weird because like I always come back so much better and a lot like less stress. And I'm like, okay, I have a goal I have to focus on and just do that. Like I've never done per se deload, but I guess you consider that a deload.
Oh, it is a big deload.
Yeah, so I just take off. Like,
yeah,
it's like screw it.
Whether or not you do a deload by reducing volume, intensity, and frequency, or if you do it just by leaving the gym for a week, that kind of break is physiologically amazing and psychologically amazing. So you're essentially like you're earning your break. And that balance of pushing it hard for a while and then taking it easy, pushing it hard, taking it easy, like that's how you just get better at stuff. If you're not pushing yourself hard ever, you're not going to get better. And if you never take it easy, you're not going to get better. Yeah. So it's all the balance. Woosah.
Yeah, that's literally all it is. And in terms of like life, lifting, whatever else people do, is that people just need to be able to have a balance to do the things that they need to do. They can't just put their eggs in one basket and just be like, hey man, I'm going to go hard, train hard, focus everything on lifting for like a long period of time. Eventually you're going to get tired and it's not going to happen. But you have to be able to like balance everything, whether that includes work, your relationships with who you're with, your lifestyle.
Fuck that, bro.
Yeah,
I'm in love with the bar.
Who needs girls? Or who needs like a relationship or anything.
Exactly.
But if you were able to balance and you have like a contest prep, you have someone that's willing to support you, it makes it so much more manageable.
For sure.
And just having to go through it. But that's quite essentially it. Is there anything that you would want to tell, let's say, your audience about like your life experience from when you started as a wrestler, going on towards weightlifting, going on towards schooling, getting your PhD? If you were to give them anything specifically to take away from this, what would you give them?
Yeah. Do explore when you're young, or any age. If you're lost, explore some things that you might like. Try them and see if they grow on you. And when they start to grow on you, and if you start to really fall for something, just try to do a really good job. Push yourself, learn more, get better, work harder. And every now and again, you're really stressed and you're really overdone it, take a nice, well-deserved break, clear your mind, don't obsess, and then come back refreshed, passionate again, and grind. Enough cycles of that, and you will see a high degree of success relative to your genetic potential. And that's, I notice I didn't say you're going to be super successful. If you have really shitty genetics at something, you're going to get way, way better. You might not be the shit at it, but you're going to be way better, and that's going to be great. And if you have decent genetics, you're going to be really, really good. And if you have great genetics, you're going to be amazing. None of those are possible if you don't do that formula of pushing, relax, push, relax. That's basically it.
And as a short Jedi once say, to do or not to do, there is no try.
Yeah, that's what's up.
Yeah, but thanks. Appreciate that.
Dude, my pleasure.